How many members we got? We got enough for 7 votes? It's about 2 minutes to 7.
Oh, yeah. Got notifications. I sent out a little meme today at the CDC and showed West Virginia. So it's almost that.
Just tell Rich he's punished for being late. That's transferable. They told us to take all the candy jars down. Take, all right, you can have as many as you want.
Thank you, because I'm only allowed one dip, right?
Unless you do your hands again.
As of last week, he don't have one, so we don't care anymore.
He said he wasn't?
Rich, you're right here, Rich.
We put you in the corner.
I'll take it. This isn't too bad. Everybody else stays home.
Well, all we get, yeah, we have.
Are we gonna have enough of them?
Start.
6, 7, we have 7.
No, that's 13 or something like
Mr. Clerk, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. We're going to call the meeting for Akron City Council to order. We're going to have the clerk read the roll.
Baylor, Connor, Freeman, Fusco, Kamer, Lombardo, McKittrick, Malik, Neal, Amobian, Samples, Somerville, Swirsky.
Yep, we got 7. We're going to ask if Councilman Freeman, will you lead us in the prayer? We're going to ask Councilman Lombardo if you will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
pray together. God, we come to you tonight and remind us that the earth is yours, and God, you oversee the affairs of men, and God, you would remind us that you are a shepherd, and that we would not have cause to fear because you do lead us, and you do guide us. And we just pray for our city, for our state, for our country, for our world, that we might look to you. And thank you, God, for those that you placed over us that have wisdom, and we trust you, and we give this meeting into your hands this evening, in your name. Amen.
Amen.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay.
The minutes from our previously held meeting have already been provided. Are there any corrections or additions? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Okay. You want to vote on it?
Yeah.
Okay. Roll call on the minutes.
Okay. Well, this is very informal, so we're just going to do this. Mr. Bryant, can we vote on the consent agenda only with 7 members?
You cannot pass it tonight unless anything has
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we refer the consent agenda. Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. At this time, I'm going to ask if we can please have a motion to go into as committee as a whole with Councilman Fusco as the chair.
Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to go into committee as a whole with Councilman Fusco as the chair.
Thank you. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. The ayes have it.
Okay.
Thank you. The regular agenda, assuming we're referring all items, we may have to go back and get those reports or just refer all the items. But that would be for council to deal with. Now that we're in the committee as a whole, what we're going to do is we're going to go through the new list of legislation. And the first one we're going to have read in by our clerk, Mr. Keith.
Okay, 1 second here, sir. Okay. First item offered by Fusco, resolution expressing appreciation to Dr. John Green for his career of service to the University of Akron and declaring an emergency.
Yes, thank you. What I'd like to mention is that this particular piece, which was drafted and submitted actually by Mr. Malik, he is practicing the safe distance, if you will, social distancing. He's out of town this past week, so he did want me to mention that. I'd like to also mention that Dr. Green has been a big member of our, outstanding member of our community for years and years and years, and has been a great asset to our community. And I'm going to ask as a sponsor that we place this item on the consent agenda. I'd like to know, though, at this time, is there any questions or comments from anyone? If there's not, I'd like to ask for a motion for consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All those in favor of consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? Very good. The ayes have it. Thank you all. The second item will be read in by Mr. Keith.
Okay, offered by Fusco. Ordinance accepting various interests in real property for certain properties described below to facilitate the completion of Summit Canton Road Market Street project and declare an emergency.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Hardy, are you here on this particular item?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
What you have before you is a piece of legislation allowing us to purchase an interest in 3 private properties related to the new roundabout that will be constructed at the intersection of 91 and East Market Street.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from any committee members at this time? Any questions whatsoever? Very good. Hearing none, is there a recommendation for consent agenda?
So moved.
All those in favor of the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you. Third item will be read in by our clerk, Mr. Keith.
This is a substitute offered as an amendment offered by Swirsky. Ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service or his designee after publicly advertising for bids to enter into a contract or contracts for the construction of the foundation and landscaping for the Main Street bronze rubber worker statue and declare an emergency.
Yes, thank you. I see Mr. Little is here on behalf of this particular piece. Mr. Little?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of council. Yes, this piece of legislation is for our roundabout minus the statue. So we did bring legislation previously about the statue, the rubber worker. This is the granite to install the granite, which is quite extensive. There'll be a vault for all the electric We did eliminate the fountain part of it because of cost. So this piece of legislation is just under 300,000. It was 700,000. So we are asking that this be put on consent agenda, please.
Okay, very good. Does any committee members have any questions? Ms. Amobian?
Just curious, the fountain would have costed us,
About another 400,000.
and that included utilities or just the?
Well, it'd be the water, but we were going to recirculate the water. But when we looked at the benefit, obviously that you can't run the fountain when there's freezing conditions, which is probably 5 to 6 months out of the year. And it wasn't going to be, the fountain it was more of a cascading over the granite and not being able to walk up to it, just driving by it. The cost benefit, we thought, let's just descale the project and let's go with the lights and with the granite and the landscaping.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This is coming out of the general fund, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ms. Amobian, Mr. Freeman?
Is the foundry that's going to be doing this in Zanesville?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. I just wanted to say to my council members, I've been to that before, saw some of their work just in the past 6 weeks, and I think Akron's going to be in a real treat for quality product. And I want to commend the city for foregoing the water fountain portion of this, but it's going to be an attractive feature on Main Street. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Any further questions at this time? Mr. Little requested consent agenda. I'd like to entertain a motion for consent. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Consent agenda it is. I'm sorry, let me make sure I get this right. The fifth item, is that right?
Fourth item.
I'm sorry, the fourth item, thank you. Mr. Keith?
Okay, item number 4, offered by Swirsky. Ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to submit an application and enter into an agreement with the Summit Akron Solid Waste Management Authority for Community Recycling Access Grant in furtherance of Mayor Horrigan's objectives of supporting new and existing community recycling projects and declaring an emergency.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Luttle?
Mr. Chairman, members of council. We apply for this grant annually. We have received it in the past. It's basically $1 per resident, so it's a $199,000 grant we're applying for. We use these funds to offset the recycling program, which also helps us with education and the total recycling program.
Okay, very good. Is there any questions from any committee members? Questions? Good. I'd like to entertain a motion for consent. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? The ayes have it. Great. 6. I'm sorry. 5.
5. Okay. Item number 5, offered by Swirsky. Ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into a contract or contracts after publicly advertising for bids for the purchase and application of asphaltic concrete pavement removal riser rings for various streets in the 2020 resurfacing program, residential resurfacing, including alternates, and approving specifications therefore and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Luttle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the council. This is the first of 3 pieces of legislation. This is our residential part of the resurfacing program. This gives us the authorization to put it out for bid. So we will bring the resurfacing legislation back to you when we do the assessment, and then we award the contract. So this is just the first piece to get the process rolling. We're very pleased this year that we are not issuing any debt because of income tax 4 and the gas tax that we received recently. So the residential part of this is just under $4 million, this part of, this piece of legislation. So with that, I would ask for consent.
That's great, Mr. Luttle, to hear. Good news. Questions from any committee members at this time? Kind of wishing we could suspend the rules. No question. Is there a request for consent?
So, second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Well done. Next item, Mr. Keith.
Okay, item number 6, offered by Swirsky. Ordinance authorized Director of Public Service to enter into a contract or contracts after publicly advertising for bids for the purchase and application of asphaltic concrete pavement removal riser rings for various streets in the 2020 resurfacing program with the arterial and collector streets resurfacing, including alternates, approving specifications therefore, and declaring emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Keith. Mr. Ludlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and all of council. This is the second piece of our resurfacing, as he said, arterial and collector. It's 2.3 million. This portion, there again, nothing's coming out of general obligation. 1.2 million is for income tax 4, and 800,000 is coming from our recently increased gas tax revenues.
Excellent. Questions from any committee members at this time? Somerville?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not really a question, but when it was read in, it should have been under Councilwoman Samples, not Swirsky.
Which one?
Almost all.
Public service is
Okay,
Councilperson Samples, just so you know, for the record.
okay, I can make that correction. Okay. What's that?
Yeah, just so you know, mine all say Kamer. Every time you said my name, it says.
Okay, okay.
So just-
Okay, thank you. Yes, Sarah Biviano.
So to clarify that, it typically goes to the chairperson. It's sponsored by the chairperson. We went to the vice chairperson when we found out the chairperson wasn't going to be here, and then we went to the next in line. So that's why
Normally we
the
go
name
right through the
changes.
committee.
Yeah, just,
Well, and plus to have the person present, I believe, typically we want to have the person present.
okay.
Okay, very good. Okay, any further questions? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to entertain a motion for consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Okay, very good. Mr. Keith?
Okay, item number 7, correct? Ordinance, offered by Swirsky. Ordinance, authorized Director of Public Service to enter into a contract or contracts after publicly advertising for bids for the purchase and application of asphaltic concrete pavement removal riser rings for various streets in the 2020 resurfacing program called the Unimproved Street Resurfacing, including alternates, approving specifications therefore, and declaring emergency.
Mr. Ludlow?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of all of council. This is our third piece. It's the smallest portion of our resurfacing program. There again, there's no general obligation debt. It's income tax 4. So these 3 pieces, we look to do another 54 miles this year in the city, which will add to the improvement that's happened over the last couple of years.
Excellent. Very good. Questions from any committee members? Mr. Lombardo?
Yes, just asking Mr. Ludlow, so with these 3 pieces of legislation, is that 3 different contracts?
No, it'll be one contract.
One contract, okay. And are any of these streets concrete? Are we at that point yet, or it's all
No,
asphalt?
it's all asphalt.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Very good. Further questions from committee members? Ms. Mobian?
Have you, or will you be providing us a list of the streets that will be
They
covered?
should have put those in your mailbox.
They did?
Yes.
How long ago? Some time ago?
Last Friday, yes. I think.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Very good. Further questions or comments? Okay, very good. Well done, Mr. Ludlow. You and your team this is outstanding. 54 miles again without any general obligation that's a very big deal.
Well, that was Mayor Horrigan's charge when he came in here, was the condition of our streets, so they're greatly improving.
Very good. We appreciate all that the mayor and his administration has done. Is there a motion for consent?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Mr. 8? Mr. 8.
Mr. 8 will read item 8, offered by Swirsky. Ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service, after publicly advertising for bids, to enter into a contract or contracts for the demolition and removal of the trailer park located at Eckridge Ditch, including trailers, houses, barn, and associated appurtenances and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Ludlow?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and member of council. Up at Lake Rockwell, our watershed, if you've been up there or you kind of seen a map, it's almost like Italy. It's kind of like a boot. Well, we're down at the bottom of the boot with our water plant, which is the southwest corner. If you went around counterclockwise about 3 o'clock, there's this Eckerd ditch. And on this Eckerd ditch, there was an old trailer park, an old house, a barn, with what they call a wastewater package plant. So all those trailers went into this package plant. It was basically like a leach field, and it went into the ditch, which went into our drinking water. So we've acquired this land. We're going to demo the barn, the house, and all those trailers. So this has been for sale for about 7 years, this land. We were able to obtain a grant. Out of the water capital, it's about $115,000, but the land and everything, the grant that we received was $770,000. So that's why we were able to do this without water capital. We'll put the land back to wetlands, and that way we will reduce the overflows into our freshwater Lake Rockwell.
Very good, thank you. Any questions? Mr. Ludlow, is this, I know oftentimes, and I assume, I don't know what the case is, so I won't assume, but you know, in the past, whenever we take something that's wetlands and we reutilize it for another reason, if you will, we typically activate something into wetlands. It sounds like that's what we're doing here. Would we how big is it? And then would we get credit down the road, say, for example, if we want to take wetlands for a different purpose?
Well, it'd be nice, but we did leverage some of our sewer programs to get these grant mitigations from some of the interest we received. So we had to sponsor certain projects. And we can't always sponsor our own project, but it's the best thing if we can sponsor our own like this one. Because we've sponsored things in Toledo when they do mitigations to reduce overflows, like into Lake Erie to reduce their phosphorus, that type of thing. So this was kind of a win-win for us.
Okay, very good, very good. Thank you. Mr. Swirsky?
Yeah, just I applaud your efforts. I really appreciate the language you use here is restore the property to a natural state as part of the watershed. You're planting wetlands, you're doing soil. Is there a need for soil remediation? Was there some testing of the soil?
We don't have to remove any soils, but that with the way they had that trailer park, they had built some I don't know, they impounded some water. There were some mounds that will be removed and put back to natural state.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Swirsky.
It's good to see that we're promoting wetlands, and wherever it ends up on the scoreboard, it's a positive.
Okay, very good. Further questions from any committee members at this time? Okay, very good. Hearing none, I'd like to entertain a motion for consent. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Very good, thank you. Item number 9, Mr. Keith.
Item number 9, offered by Swirsky. Ordinance, authorize Director of Public Service without the formality of advertising for bids to enter into a contract or contracts with Watson Marlowe for the purchase of 4 chemical transfer pumps for the Akron water plant and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Ludlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of council. Yes, we have 4 of what we call our chemical feed pumps. They're obsolete. We cannot get parts any further for these pumps, so we're replacing them in kind with a new upgraded model of these Watson Marlowe pumps. They're for our fluoride and our hydrochloric acid. Obviously, fluoride treatment is for the water and promotes good for your dental, but the hydrochloric acid manages our pH. So our pH is tasted over. If it gets too high, it keeps that pH neutral. Obviously, if the pH gets too low, then it gets corrosive and it could eat our pipes. So that's what these chemical feed pumps are for.
Very good, thank you. Is there any questions from anyone? Okay, is there a motion for consent agenda?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. At this time, I'd like to entertain a motion that we go out of committee as a whole. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor of going out of committee as a whole signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? Thank you. We'll now reconvene into council as a whole.
Are we doing roll call on that?
Yeah, we can do a roll call on the vote.
Okay. Going out of executive session, Freeman. Fusco.
Aye.
Lombardo. McKittrick. Amobian. Committee as a whole, I'm sorry. And Somerville.
Aye.
Swirsky.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all. There's a spider.
What's that?
Microphone. There's a spider on the microphone. Okay.
I don't see anything.
Apologize for the little delay here, folks, but there's a. Here, what? Don't pick it up. It's right here.
Just a little buddy spot, little white spider.
That's what's taking pictures of.
We had a spider. Spider? Yeah, on the microphone. She was worried about that. Just let him go.
Is it dead now? Yeah. I mean,
We could just start over.
yes, Brian, real quick, but. So bites you, no problem. He may have to read it back in. He, legislation, no, regular legislation, we got called committee chairs, we got to take the same time on the agenda, and then go into the new list, Bob, you're gonna have to read the new list.
Again?
Yeah, that's what he said.
No, let's ask that again. That doesn't make sense.
Does he have to read everything again?
He doesn't have to read everything else in there.
All he does is say,
Yeah? Okay.
it's just like a regular council meeting, we have to read it back in. Every week we do the same thing. We have to go through the.
Old.
Every committee.
Okay. We're now going to go into our old business. Budget and Finance, Councilman Freeman. Time will be granted. Planning and Economic Development, Councilman Fusco.
Time on the agenda.
Time will be granted. Public Service, Councilman Swirsky.
Public service. I'm on the agenda.
Time will be granted. We'll now move into our new legislation.
Okay. Item number 1, offered by Fusco. If it sounds like it's repetitive, you've heard it before. Resolution expressing appreciation for Dr. John Green for his career of service to the University of Akron and declaring an emergency.
Councilman Fusco,
Consent agenda.
this item will be placed on the consent agenda.
Item number 2, offered by Fusco, ordinance accepting various interests in real property for certain property described below to facilitate the completion of the Canton Road Market Street project and declaring an emergency.
Councilman Fusco,
Consent agenda.
this item will also be placed on the consent agenda.
Item number 3, offered by Swirsky, ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service or his designee after publicly advertising for bids to enter into a contract or contracts for the construction of the foundation and landscaping for the Main Street Bronze Rubber Worker statue and declaring an emergency.
Councilman Swirsky,
No, I have to report it out because I shared the,
So you're doing them all.
so I have to, yeah.
Councilman Fusco?
The report of the committees for consent agenda.
This item will also be placed on the consent agenda.
Item number 5, offered by Swirsky. Ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into a contract or contracts after publicly advertising for bids for the purchase and application of asphalted concrete, pavement removal, and riser rings for various streets in the 2020 resurfacing program and the residential resurfacing program, including alternates, approving specifications therefore, and declaring an emergency.
Councilman Fusco?
Consent agenda.
This item will also be placed on the consent agenda.
Item number 6, offered by Swirsky. What?
Councilman Mobian?
Okay, you're right. I'm sorry. Going back to number 4. That cricket's barking in my pocket. Offered by Swirsky, ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to submit an application into the agreement with the Summit Akron Solid Waste Management Authority for the Community Recycling Access Grant in furtherance of Mayor Horrigan's objectives of supporting new and existing community recycling projects and declaring an emergency.
Councilman Fusco?
Report of committee is for consent agenda.
This item will also be placed on the consent agenda.
Okay, we're on number 6 now, correct?
Yes.
Item number 6, offered by Swirsky, ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into a contract or contracts after publicly advertising for bids for the purchase and application of asphalted concrete, pavement removal, riser rings for various streets in the 2020 resurfacing program and the arterial and collector streets resurfacing, including alternates, approving specifications therefore, and declaring an emergency.
Councilman Fusco?
Report of the committees for consent agenda.
This item will be placed on the consent agenda.
Item number 7, offered by Swirsky, ordinance authorizing Director of Public Service to enter into a contract or contracts after publicly advertising for bids for the purchase and application of asphalted concrete, pavement removal, riser rings, and various streets in the 2020 resurfacing program for the unimproved street resurfacing, including alternates, and approving specifications therefore, and declaring an emergency.
Councilman Fusco?
Report of the committee is for consent agenda.
This item will be placed on the consent agenda.
Item number 8, offered by Swirsky, ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service after publicly advertising for bids to enter into a contract or contracts for the demolition and removal of a trailer park located at Akron Ditch, including the trailers, house, barn, and associated appurtenances, and declaring an emergency.
Councilman Fusco?
Report of the committee is for consent agenda.
This item will be placed on the consent agenda.
And finally, item number 9, offered by Swirsky, ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service without the formality of advertising for bids to enter into a contract or contract with the Watson Marlowe for the purchase of 4 chemical transfer pumps for the Akron water plant and declaring an emergency.
Councilman Fusco?
Report of the committees for consent agenda.
This item will also be placed on the consent agenda. We'll now go to the portion of our meeting that we do refer to as our public comment period. Although we are having a closed meeting on tonight, we still want to recognize the important part of this meeting, which is public comment period. Do we have something else, Mr. Hardy, that I missed? Okay, I just want to make sure. And so we did put out to the public that they can still participate in public comment period, although our meetings are closed, and we put out an email address, and we did receive a comment. So I'm going to ask that the clerk at this time will read it in for us.
Okay, I moved into it's from Harry J. Hilligus. I moved into the Mayflower Manor in January 15, 2019. At the time, there was a small market beside the front door. It was closed in May. I was told this was done to put in office space. To this day, the space is empty, and the downtown residents have no place to shop except by bus to Aldi's or Dave's. When will the city negotiate a deal to bring in a downtown convenience store so residents can easily get milk, bread, or a can of soup?
So, Mr. Hillegas, we want to thank you so much for submitting during our public comment period, and we will make sure that your concern gets addressed to your councilperson, which is Councilman Swirsky. Anything else coming before council, Councilman Fusco?
I would just like to make a motion that we excuse Baylor, Neal, Samples, Malik, and Connor.
Is there a second? All in favor signify by saying aye. We are going to go into our committee assignments. Rules, Councilman Freeman.
2:30.
Public Safety, Councilman Swirsky. I'm going to help you out, 2:15. Budget and Finance, Councilman
3 p.m.
Freeman. Parks and Rec, Councilman Lombardo. 1:45. Yep. Planning and Economic Development, Councilman Fusco.
1.
Housing and Neighborhood Assistance, Councilman Fusco.
Subject to call.
Public Service, Councilman Swirsky.
2 o'clock.
Health and Social Services, Councilwoman Amobian. Public Utilities and Green Committee, Councilman Swirsky. Do we have anything else coming before council? I did want to mention just one thing before we do that. I just want to thank our staff who have been working tirelessly for the past 4 days, cleaning and sterilizing and just making sure that the space here at council was kept clean and sanitized. So we want to thank them for that. Also, we will keep council abreast in terms of how we will conduct business on next Monday as we look to how we're going to be able to address that as well. So we'll keep council posted. Councilman Fusco?
Motion to adjourn.
Seeing no objections, we're adjourned.
7:35. This concludes the live broadcast of Akron City Council. Margot Somerville, President of Council, presiding.